Welcome and thank you for joining today's overview of the swine industry. Please note that all participant lines will be muted until the Q&A portion of the call. We will provide you with instructions on how to ask a verbal question at that time. You are welcome to submit written questions during the presentation, and these will be addressed during Q&A. To send a note, select All Panelists on the Send To drop-down menu of the chat panel located on the lower right-hand side of your screen. If you are unable to see the chat panel, please click on the blue chat icon in the top corner of the WebEx. If you require technical assistance, send a note to the event producer or call our help desk at 888-796-6118. With that, I'll turn the call over to Liz Clark. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Clark with Professional Development Services Branch, and I'd also like to welcome you to the webinar today. Our speaker today is Jan Archer. Jan is a pork producer from eastern North Carolina, where she and her husband, Jack, operate their 1,200 sow breed-to-wean family farm. Jan graduated from Michigan State University and has been part of the pork industry for more than 40 years. She has raised livestock in 4 different states and 3 different countries, including Honduras, Guatemala, and Singapore. Jan is the past president of the National Pork Board and currently serves on its board of directors. In addition to the farm, Jan has a consulting business in which she delivers training to producers, including PQA Plus and TQA certifications. In her free time, she enjoys playing with the 4 smartest, funniest, and most beautiful grandchildren in the world and cheering on the Green Bay Packers. And with that, I'll turn the call over to Jan.
Thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone. So happy to have you join us this morning. As Liz said, I'm a farmer. I've been a farmer for more than 40 years, and I don't have any letters after my name. So what I'm talking about today is really from a farmer's perspective, from my history in the pork industry, and to give you a little bit of background about what we as producers deal with every day and kind of what our history is. So as we move along here, our pork industry 101 is just to give you an idea of kind of how the industry has advanced over the years. So 50 years ago, everybody had a little bit of everything. They had a few pigs, they might have a cow, some chickens. Mostly were raised outdoors in shelters with straw bedding, and weather extremes definitely took a toll. Full disclosure, we still raise pigs that way sometimes. I started out raising pigs that way. And some people are very successful in doing that on a small scale. It's much harder, virtually impossible to do that on a large scale. I have 1,200 sows. That may seem like a large farm. Frankly, it's small enough to put us at risk because we only produce about 600 piglets every week. Go into a commercial nursery, those pigs are going into a building that holds 2,000 pigs. So it's just like when your kids are at home and they're perfectly healthy, and then they go to school and they're exposed to everyone else and they become little viral factories. So ideally, we would like pigs going from one farrowing farm, we'll talk a little bit about vocabulary, to one nursery or one wean-to-finish barn. With my farm, I can't do that. I just can't produce as many pigs as it takes to do that. And the state of North Carolina has a moratorium on more pig farms. So the number of pig farms that we have, permitted farms, that will stay steady. It is what it is, what it is. We could buy another farm, but we're not able to grow our farm. So we've always had animals in pens, and we still have animals in pens. But now our pens have roofs. Most pigs and chickens today are housed in these kind of confinement facilities, and that means that rodents and birds have a harder time getting into the animals and spreading disease. The barns are cleaned on a regular basis. We'll talk more about that later. They're air conditioned. So on my farm, a sow's critical temperature, as you probably know, is somewhere between 65 and 70 degrees. Interestingly, me too. That's my favorite temperature, which is one of the reasons that we have sows. It's a comfortable environment for our employees and for us to work in. But those baby pigs, they want their temperature about 92 degrees. So when we're inside and inside these buildings, we're able to provide a microclimate for those small pigs so that they can thrive too. Our farms definitely don't look the same as they did even 25 years ago, but certainly 50 years ago. That is not a picture of me on the screen, but that's how I used to raise pigs these many years ago. The pigs would be outside. I'm originally from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. If any of you are familiar with the climate up there, it's pretty cold for a lot of the year. My job, we would have sows in huts similar to the huts that you see here on the screen. And my job when I was younger and faster would be to run to the huts, grab up all the baby pigs that had not turned into pig sickles overnight, and run to the fence line before the sow tried to kill me, so that we could look at those pigs and process them. That's much easier now. We have easy access to the animals. We have easy access to their individual treatment, and it makes us a much, much more productive industry. Pork has changed. It's changed a lot. Just since 1959, we've decreased our land footprint, our water footprint by 41%, our land use by 78%, and our carbon footprint by 35%. An Iowa study also shows that pork producers use 80% less energy per pig raised today than they did in the 70s. So that combination of modern housing systems along with better nutrition, better breeding, better husbandry practices and disease prevention, they've all driven this dramatic evolution in raising pigs. I have to emphasize that that doesn't mean we're sitting on our laurels. We work constantly to continue to reduce that footprint. That water use, we're still working on that. Our biggest water use, frankly, comes in the plants that are grown to feed our animals. So we're looking heavily at those pillars, and frankly, they're part of our pillars of sustainability. So this is my farm. Welcome to my farm. This center building, this little center building that you'll see, that's our shower-in unit and our office. So if you come to my farm, and welcome, I would love to bring you to my farm, the first thing you do is take a shower. Everyone that comes into the building, all employees, all visitors, are going to shower into the farm. From there, they can go over here on the right to the breeding barn, and that's where all of our sows and very few boars are kept. Or this middle section is where our farrowing barns are, and we'll talk a little bit about vocabulary. We have, as I said, we have 1,200 sows, and we have about 7 boars. When I first got into the business, we did natural mating. So we would breed 1 boar to 1 sow, and we would breed 1 genetically superior boar to 1 genetically superior sow and have 1 genetically superior litter. 99.99% of the commercial farms today use artificial insemination. We use post-cervical artificial insemination, and that means that we have a few boars. We have about 7 boars. And their job is mostly just to walk up and down the aisles and wait for the sow to jump up on the side of the pen and say, "Hi there, sailor, new in town," and identify those females that are in heat. But we will then breed them through artificial insemination. And 1 boar ejaculate will inseminate 25 sows after it's been extended. So we can spread that genetic superiority over a much wider and much larger group of animals. So just in case you have been away from the farm for a while or haven't spent a lot of time on a pig farm, let me just go over some pig industry terms just so we're all on the same page. A pig, swine, hog, any porcine animal. A gilt is a young female that has not yet given birth. Farrowing is a term that we use for giving birth, for pigs giving birth. A barrow is a castrated male pig. A boar is an intact male pig. Feeder pigs are young pigs that weigh about 50 pounds, and they're going to be about 9 weeks of age. So when we first built our farm, we had 624 sows, and we kept them until they were feeder pigs, till they were about 60 pounds. We kept them for 9 weeks. For us to expand and be able to produce more pigs and to become a 1,200 sow farm, we had to change those nurseries into farrowing houses because legally in North Carolina we can't change the steady state live weight or the animal units of the farm. So the only way for us to expand was to take the nurseries out, replace those with farrowing rooms, and then we could become a 1,200 sow farm, and we sell wean pigs. All of our wean pigs go to Indiana. So every Monday, 600 pigs get on a truck, and they ride to Indiana. So keep that in mind as we're later in this presentation talking about foreign animal disease and some of the implications. We have a lot of animals on the road every day, leaving our counties and leaving our states and crossing those state lines. So that's a real challenge for us. A sow is a female pig after she's had at least one litter. Piglets are those little pigs that are still nursing, and weaning, just like with any mammal, is removing young pigs from the mother's milk and putting them on solid feed. So this is an example of a nursery. Every barn is kept clean with regular high-pressure washing. Sows are kept in individual stalls, always and almost always in farrowing. In gestation, we have some open pens and some stalls. We will generally keep animals in stalls until we have determined and certified pregnancy, so after they've had an ultrasound preg check. And that's going to be maybe 35 days. And then on some farms, they're going to go into pens, and on some farms, they're going to go into other stalls. My farm has both stalls and pens, and we have some free stalls. So there's a large open pen, and then there are some open back stalls in the front where those animals are fed. And full disclosure, those animals very rarely are in the back open loafing area. They're usually, if they're in gestation, they're in their stalls, because that gives them a place that the food is going to come. Most importantly, they can be next to an animal because they're herd animals. They like to be close to another animal, but they're not having to fight for food or space, and that helps protect their pregnancy. So they do very well in both in those pens. The breeding and birthing area, sows are pregnant for 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days, and they'll produce. This is 10 to 14 pigs per litter. That's a much narrower range than that actually exists. They can have anywhere from 1 to, certainly have litters of more than 20, but on the average they're going to be 10 to 14, and they're weaned at 21 to 21 days after birth. On my farm, we wean at 24 days, and we wean once a week. So they'll then go into a nursery, and they'll stay in that nursery for 8 weeks, or they'll go to what we call a wean to finish barn. And that's a finishing barn that has been retrofitted to accommodate those little pigs so they can easily get into the feeder. The waters are low for them. They have brooders and that create microclimates of heat for them. It just depends on what kind of system they're in. From the nursery, they will go to a farrowing barn. A finishing barn. So this is an example of a finishing barn. They're going to stay here until they go to market. So that's generally going to be about 13 more weeks if they've been in a nursery. So our target market weight is about 285 pounds now. When I first started raising pigs, my target weight was 220 pounds. So you can see that, yes, we have increased the number of sows. We've also taken pigs to a higher weight, and we're significantly more productive than we were back when I started raising pigs. All of that means that we are producing a lot more pork using the same inputs or similar inputs. You can see that all of the pigs in this picture look pretty much the same. We're not cloning, but we work very hard to produce a consistent animal, because we want, when a consumer goes to the grocery store and they buy a pork chop and it's delicious, and they go back the next year to buy another pork chop, it's equally delicious, and it's predictable, and it's consistent. So to do that, we have to have a consistently lean pig, and the science is clear. Today's leaner pigs, they grow better. And they grow more consistently when we keep them in carefully controlled environments that's clean and isolated from disease. Biosecurity it's the mantra of absolutely every pig farmer. We live, breathe, and die biosecurity. I train people on farms. We spend a lot of time talking about biosecurity, which is what all the things that we do to keep diseases from coming into the herd, or if it's in the herd, to keep that disease from spreading. There's a lot of ways diseases can be transmitted, so we try to cut that vector point at every point that we can find it. First of all, we limit visitors. Not everybody can come on the farm. I was on the farm yesterday. The first thing they asked me was, where have you been in the last 72 hours? Have you been near pigs? Have you touched a pig? Do you live with someone who has another pig? People are not great vectors of disease necessarily, but they are certainly vectors, and we want to stop that. When you drive onto my farm, you also will drive through a disinfecting station that will disinfect your vehicle. All the feed trucks that come to deliver feed to my feed are disinfected as they come into the farm. The tires are all disinfected. The people that drive those trucks are not allowed to come out of their vehicle. They're not allowed to walk on the farm property. We load the truck. Once an animal is on the truck, it cannot ever come back onto the farm. Gone is gone. And we have standard operating procedures for the entry of all staff, all visitors, all equipment. If you come into the farm, your glasses will be washed. If you plan to bring a phone into the farm, we usually don't recommend that because it has to go through the showers. Hardly any phones survive that. It's just very important that everything that comes into the farm is clean and disinfected. Again, it's like when your children go to school. Once those animals are in confinement, they're certainly separated from most of the diseases, but if you get something in there, it will spread, and we just don't want that to happen. So you come in and you will take a shower. All of your street clothes are left on what we call the dirty side. So unless any of you are calling in from a pig farm, you are calling from the dirty side of the world, and you are not considered on the clean side of the world until you've showered into a farm and are wearing farm clothes. So you would leave all of your clothes on what we call the dirty side. You shower through completely, and on the other side of the shower will be clean clothes, clean underwear, clean everything, and that's what you wear on the farm. Boots are provided, so they don't ever cross what we call the line of separation between the clean side and the dirty side. There's always a plan for international traveling, and generally most places will require at least 4 nights of downtime, 4 nights that you have not been outside of the country before you come back to the farm. If you go to a country that has active foot and mouth, African swine fever, classical swine fever, that number goes up, obviously. Closer to a week. You have to demonstrate that you have been away from anything for a week and that none of the clothes that you wore in that country have been brought back to the States, and certainly not to a farm. So sanitation of facilities. We do this all the time. I told you that my farm is a family farm, and that means that everybody that lives in our family works on our farm, whether they want to or not. And I can tell you that my children, for example, when they were very small, their first job was feeding baby pigs. And then their next job, when they're big enough to do it, is to help disinfect and high-pressure wash the buildings. And my son, when he was about 10, was when he was big enough to hold a high-pressure sprayer and not be slammed against the back wall hard enough for Child Protective Services to be called. That was his job. And I will tell you, it is mind-numbingly boring. And his dad came in and said, and my son said, "When am I done?" And my husband said, "I'm going to run to the store and get lunch, and then I'll come back and tell you when you're done." And he went to the little country store by our farm, and he got hamburgers for everybody, and he brought it to my son, and he laid it on the floor. And he said, "That's when you're done. When you can eat off the floor, then you're done, because that's where our pigs eat." We take the sanitation really, really seriously. Everything has to be cleaned, and then it has to be disinfected, and then it has to completely dry before we put animals back into a barn. We also make sure that all of our trucks are clean. There are separate truck washes away from the farm so we can clean and disinfect and dry those farms. And once an animal crosses the line of separation and or is on the truck, they can never come back. If they're driving to a packing plant and the packing plant burns down, they still cannot come back to our farm. They've got to go someplace else. If they're going from my farm to Indiana, and they get word that there are tornadoes in Indiana, and they can't go to that farm, they cannot come back to my farm. They have to go somewhere else. When you leave the farm as an animal, you're gone forever. I talk to people all the time, and they always say, pigs should be outside. That's where God intended them to be. Maybe. But I told you, I'm from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It is really, really cold there. And now I live in eastern North Carolina. It gets really, really hot here. I'm not saying that you cannot raise pigs outside. You certainly can. You will not be as productive. They use much more energy for metabolism if they're too hot or too cold. And I promise you, if you opened one of these doors on one of these buildings, those pigs would not go outside. They are way smarter than that. So we are very proud of the way that we raise animals. And I'll tell you, when I was raising pigs outside and we got to go inside, we were all happy. The pigs were happy. I was happy. We were all happy. The other thing that I hear a lot of talk about is family farms versus corporate farms. So 87% of the 2.2 million farms in the U.S. are owned by individuals or a married couple responsible for operating the farm. That's my farm. My husband and I own our farm. We are also a corporation, and that helps us with succession planning. If it's a partnership, usually it's a parent and one or more children or close relatives. So 97% of the farms are family-owned and operated. Even those farms that are legally corporations are generally family-controlled, so that would include mine. There are only 7,000 non-family controlled corporate farms in the U.S. My son, who grew up on our farm forever, when he graduated from college, my husband told him, you have to go work for somebody else for 2 years. You can come back to the farm, but you have to work for somebody else for 2 years. And he never came back because everybody else paid him better and treated him better. So he actually manages farms for a corporate entity. But that's my husband, my son, my grandchildren, my daughter-in-law. They all rely on those corporate farms to feed their families. So for them, that farm is also their family farm. So just to talk a little bit about U.S. pork production impact by the numbers. Over 60,000 pig farmers annually market more than 118 million hogs. And that gives us about $23.4 billion with the B dollars in total gross receipts. Our industry supports 550,000 U.S. jobs, and pork exports are a huge, huge part of our industry. And we're going to talk more about that, but just in 2016, there were 5.1 billion pounds of pork exported. That's $5.94 billion in value, and 25.8% of U.S. production in 2016. Here in 2018, it's closer to 27%. That means that if you see a pig truck on the road, more than one out of every 4 of those pigs is leaving the country. That is really, really important for our bottom line. Talk a little bit about pig density. There are actually pigs in all 50 states of the country, but the bulk are centered in a few areas. So that Iowa, southern Minnesota, Midwest Corn Belt has the bulk of the pigs. This is the grain belt, and, you know, pigs and corn generally go together. Next comes North Carolina, where I am. Tobacco used to be king in North Carolina, and then when tobacco left the state, North Carolina's farmers turned to pigs to fill that gap on their farms. North Carolina also kind of invented the contract system. So when we were living in Singapore and the island of Singapore kicked all the pigs off the island and said, you pig people have to go too, we were basically homeless and we could have lived anywhere. That was in 1987. We chose North Carolina because there was real innovation happening here. Innovation in technology and the contract system, innovation in this contract system. So in that system, which is a system under which my farm operates, you plug into the system where you have the largest skill set. So, and that's also the largest investment and potentially the largest return. But you have a production partner. So in that contract system, generally the farmer, which would be me, provides the farm, the land, the expertise, and the labor. The production partner, which is usually an integrator or it can be a packing plant. In my case, it's not a packing plant. They will provide the pigs, the feed, anything that goes in or on the feed, on the pigs. So any medication will then be provided by that production partner. So that means that we can't take advantage of the high highs because we're basically paid by the number of pigs that leave the building. But we also don't go out of business when grain soars to $8 a bushel or pig prices drop to $30 a hundredweight. That would put us out of business. When we came to North Carolina, we had a pretty significant skill set. We'd been raising pigs all over the world for quite a long time. But we didn't have the millions of dollars that it takes to build a farm. So having that guaranteed income means that I could go to a bank and say, this is what I'm going to get every week. And that banker is much more interested in talking to me than if I said, I'm an independent pig producer. I don't know what I'm going to make every week. Here's as much as I could make, and here's as little as I could make. That banker is not interested in talking to me. You can see on this pig density, so we've got pigs in the Midwest, we've got pigs here in the Southeast, we've got some pigs in Utah. There are definitely some areas of the country that have more pigs than others. This is the state rankings by hog and pig inventory. So if you look, Iowa's number one by a whole bunch, by multiples. And it's ranking North Carolina as number 2 and Minnesota as number 3, but the pounds of pork of live weight that are marketed is lower in North Carolina than it is in Minnesota. The reason we're number 2 is because we produce so many more young pigs in North Carolina, but then they leave our state because we're a grain deficit state. We do not have enough feed to feed all of our animals. So it's more cost effective to send the pigs one time when they weigh, maybe 15 pounds to where the feed is than to continuously bring 24 tons of feed at a time or rail loads of feed back from the Midwest to North Carolina. This is really hard to read, but really all it's saying is that while smaller farms are declining in number, the bigger farms are staying solid and increasing. And that's the same in all industries. That's the same in grocery stores. Larger farms are able to take advantage of economies of scale that smaller farms just can't take advantage of. And this is why, while farm numbers are decreasing, we are producing a record amount of pork, and we're doing it in the most efficient way. We are the world's low-cost pork producer. We produce pigs cheaper than anybody else in the world. This basically shows something similar. There are more small farms, but they have a much smaller percent of inventory. And while there are fewer larger operations, they have a much greater inventory. This is just a list of the top, a breakdown of the top 20 pork producing companies in the country and their sow numbers. So keep in mind, every sow produces about 21 to 24 pigs per sow per year. And there are a few that are going to produce more than 30. So when you look at these kind of numbers, number 1 is Smithfield. They're the largest pork producer in the world. Then Triumph Foods, which is a co-op, Seaboard Foods, the Mash-Offs, Pipestone. Look at the number of sows that they have. We're looking at very large sow numbers, and that allows them to take advantage of those economies of scale. This gives you an idea of how our swine production system works. So from breeding to farrowing, remember that's 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days. Then at about 3 weeks later, we wean them. They can go into a nursery, and they're going to stay there for about, really in the nursery, they're going to stay closer to 4 weeks. And then then they'll move on to a finishing barn where they're going to stay until they go to market at 280 pounds. Or they have the option of going to a wean to finish barn. Most pigs in the U.S. are raised in segregated systems, or what we call multi-site production. So you'll have the reproductive farm, which has sows and boars, and the babies are born. Then they're going to move to the grow-finish phase, and that will either be a nursery and then a finisher or a wean-to-finish barn. And that lets us cut lines of diseases. It lets people plug into an operation in the place that they're most comfortable. if you are a sow farm, you've got to have staff. You're going to be there all the time. If you're a nursery, you're probably going to have people there all day, at least from 8 to 5 or 8 to 3. A finisher, you can have a finishing barn, and that can be a part-time job. You can have a town job and walk through your finishing buildings once in the morning and once at night, and it just doesn't require the same level of investment or time investment. So, again, people plug in where they're comfortable and where they can afford to plug in. This gives you an idea of how much it costs to make that pork chop. This also doesn't include labor costs or medication costs. So the current live hog price today, I just looked it up before we got on the phone here, was $80.52 per hundredweight of live animal. That gives the pig owner about $225 per animal that they sell. So if production costs are $150, that returns about $75 per head to the farmer, and that doesn't include labor. So if we have a spike in feed cost or a drop in pig cost, that makes a dramatic difference really, really quickly. So we move pigs for a variety of reasons. We keep them to keep the ages separate but similar, to maintain biosecurity, to optimize costs by keeping all pigs eating the same feed together. An animal from the time they're born till the time they go to market will eat up to 16 different diets. So we have to keep those pigs together to make sure that they're eating what they need to be eating at the right time and all together. So just to give us a little perspective, U.S. swine producers wean more than 2 million pigs every week, and that's the equivalent of 1,666 livestock trailers or 5,000 gooseneck trailers that are on the roads every week, going from county to county, to state, always on the road. We market about 2 million hogs per week, and that's 12,121 livestock trailers that are on the road going from the farm to the packing plant. This gives you an idea of where our packing plants, our harvest plants are. All these little orange dots, those are packing plants. And you can see that they're concentrated in a few places, but remember we've got pigs in all 50 states, so we're trucking pigs all over the place to get pigs to market. In 2018, we're going to break a record again. We're going to break a record in how many pigs that we're producing. We're up 4% in the total number of pigs that we're producing, 4% just in our December to February pig crop report. Our breeding herd is up 1.5%. But in addition to having more sows, which is our breeding herd, they are producing more pigs. So that's why we can be up 4% in production and only up 1.5% in sows. We're really good at what we do, and perfectly honestly, sometimes we're too good at what we do. We're producing a lot of pork. And when you look at this meat production outlook, for the first time in history, we actually are producing more pork than we are producing beef. And the downside of that is our domestic pork consumption has been really pretty flat. For a long time, we were at about 50 pounds per person. Today, we're at 52.4, not a dramatic improvement, but it's directionally correct. But it still means that most of that excess production has got to leave our shores. We have got to be able to export those products. Our 2016 packing capacity was at 2.453 million animals. So you can see we bumped above that packing capacity. And what that means is that we have to stay open on Saturdays. We had to kill pigs over the weekend to make sure that we got those animals processed. 2017, we had some new packing plants, but look what's happening. We're bumping up against that 2017 level. These are the U.S. packing plants that are under construction right now. So this is what's going to give us a total increase in production over 2015 of 7.4%. Domestically, we're not eating much more pork, so that 7.4% has got to leave our shores. We've got to be able to export that product. So let's talk a little bit about our pork exports. 96% of the population of the world lives outside the United States. But pork is the #1 consumed protein in the world. So we want to get our protein, our pork protein, to the rest of the country where they're hungry for it. Pork is the largest consumed protein by a lot. Beef comes in second at 23rd, and poultry comes in third at 35th. Poultry comes in second, and beef comes in third. When you look at the products that are exported, we're not necessarily exporting whole carcasses. We're exporting the product that that country wants. So we export 20% of our butts, our pork butts, which is not the butt, it is the upper shoulder, to Asia and Mexico. Loins, 20% of our loins go to Asia, largely Japan. Japan loves our loins. Legs and hams, a lot of those go to Mexico. Bellies, 7% go to Asia. Our picnics, 40% go to Asia, North and South America. But we also have offals, which are also called variety meats. It's things that we don't eat. I'm in the South. We actually do eat some of these, but the vast majority of people in the country don't eat these. So we export over 90% of our snouts, our ears, our feet, our tails, 90% of the tongue, liver, heart, kidney, and 90% of the stomach, the bladder, the uterus, the bung. Those are not valuable in the United States. They are gold when we ship them outside of the United States. So it's important that we maintain our ability to export those products. We have that the National Pork Board have a strategic plan that we review every 5 years. And our 2015 strategic plan, our goal was that at the year end of 2019, that we would have increased by 9% the average value and quantity of pork that we're producing. At year end of 2016, we had not made that. We were 2% under where we should have been for that goal. We were above where we had been, but we were 2% up below our goal for that time, both in volume and in value. In 2016, though, our volume was up 8% from 2015, 2% from 2012 highs. Our value was up 7% from 2015. And our trading partners were Mexico at the largest. This is in volume. China, Hong Kong came in second. Japan came in third, rounding out with Canada, Central and South America, South Korea. These countries might look familiar to you as you're listening to our trade issues that we're facing right now and our tariff issues. In value, Japan is our largest trading partner. They demand high quality, but they're willing to pay for high quality. And they're also buying loins. So by value, Japan is our largest trading partner. Second is Mexico. Then third is China, again rounding out that Canada, South Korea, Central and South America. So look at this, at $1.5 billion in revenue from Japan. When you go to Japan and look at what they're buying, pork is their absolutely #1 consumed product, both in the home and in restaurants and in convenience stores. We really, really want to maintain that value. So there are challenges and opportunities everywhere you look in the pork industry. In order to achieve the goal that we have, which is that increasing by 9% our volume and value, we've got a lot of challenges. First, the setbacks we have seen in the last few years. So in 2013, if anyone on the call was at all affiliated with the pork industry in 2013, 2014, we were faced with porcine epidemic diarrhea virus, a virus we had never seen in our herds before, a virus that was unbelievably virulent, and a virus that killed every baby pig it touched. And it was horrific. My farm got it. It was financially horrific. It was emotionally horrific. And it meant that as we were exporting pork, we simply didn't have product to send overseas. People that had been buying for us forever were paying extraordinarily high prices because we just didn't have the product. So very often they went to someone else. They went to another country to buy their pork. And as you know, it's way harder to regain a lost customer in anything than it is to gain a new customer, and that was a problem. We had a West Coast port shutdown. There were our West Coast ports had issues with the people that were working in those ports, and we have surging competition. But we still have great opportunity. We've got a lot of product coming on the market, and we can now show our reliability, our different product mix. We are the low-cost producer, and as we discussed, with a growing population and growing global GDPs, there is and will be a demand for U.S. pork. This just gives you, in 2017, January and February, it gives you an idea of just in that short period of time how our volume and value for the pork products that we have increased. There are absolutely risks ahead. Market access, competition, politics, tweets, all of that affects what we do every day. And as farmers, we have very little impact on that. You know, we're kind of at the mercy of all of those things. This compares our 2017 compared to 2016 pork export destinations. In volume, Mexico, this is the first time in 2016 that Mexico hit the top both in volume and value. In volume, then China and Japan. In value, then Japan, then China. But look at those numbers. We increased over 2016 in every country with the exception of the ASEAN region, which is that Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia region. And the same thing in value. We are still increasing. Even with all the challenges that we're facing, we're still increasing. We want to have a return on our investment. So we have, for every $1 million of pork variety meats, and that's those offals, the ears, the entrails, we have an increase of 20 cents per hundredweight in value. So you can see why farmers are eager to have all of these trade disputes settled, because that's our bottom line. That's whether or not we are in the red or in the black. Commerce and trade impacts, SPS issues, which is sanitary, phytosanitary issues, transportation issues, tariffs, all of this impacts what we do every day, but we don't get to impact it very much. So let's talk a little bit about animal disease outbreak and preparedness. The value of trade is significant. If we got foot and mouth disease or African swine fever or classical swine fever, in 2017 our pork exports were 26.6% of our production, and that's $53.47 per head of value. Every trade disruption we have means that we lose money. Every trade disruption. We cannot insulate ourselves against that on the farm. We have great supporting international trade partners. We have the National Pork Producers Council, the National Pork Checkoff, who I'm on the board of directors of the Pork Checkoff. The Pork Checkoff provides the science that is then given to the USDA, the OIE, and the National Pork Producers Council. The National Pork Producers Council fights on the policy side. All of this means that it's one of the largest pork-producing countries in the world. Disruptions of trade have huge impact for us, and not just for our country, but for me as a farmer. If we lose our trade partners, I will go out of business. My little farm will go out of business. So it is so important to us that we keep diseases out. Pork producers have those biosecurity protocols in place to keep diseases from entering our farm. We have specific policies for people that are traveling internationally and for hosting international visitors, and all that is designed to reduce the risk of accidental disease introduction. If we got foot and mouth disease, one confirmed case of foot and mouth disease in the United States would cause severe economic consequences to the pork industry and other commodities that would then devastate the rural economy. The Center for Ag and Rural Development and Food and Ag Policy Research Institute estimates that the revenue loss to the pork and the beef industries, if we got FMD, would average $12.9 billion per year. And look at this, that this is over 10 years. There's not a quick recovery from this. If we get foot and mouth disease, we won't be back to being solvent in a year. It's going to take over 11 years to recover from that. And that revenue doesn't include response costs. That will be in the billions of dollars just for communities and how we would have to regulate transportation in affected areas. The USDA has estimated that each $1 billion of export value supports 4,528 jobs directly and 12,000 jobs throughout the economy. So we really want to keep these diseases out. This gives you an idea of the effect of foot and mouth disease on hog prices. We see an immediate crash right here, and then a slow recovery. But look at this. Even after 10 years, we would not have recovered. After 11 years, we'd still be feeling the impact. This is similarly on pork industry revenue. Even after 11 years, we would still not have fully recovered in revenue. There would be an estimated $5 billion discrepancy between the baseline revenue and actual revenue. This is the impact of FMD on total net returns in the pork industry. Same thing. Look at this long line and how long it takes to recover from that. Classical swine fever, same thing. The Center for Ag and Rural Development Food and Ag Policy Research Institute says that over 10 years, the cumulative losses if we get classical swine fever to the pork industry is $51 billion. To the corn industry that feeds those pigs, $28.4 billion, and to the soybean industry that feeds those pigs, $16.8 billion with a B dollars. When an FAD strikes, we have got to be prepared. We will not be able to move animals around. We have got to be prepared. So one of the things I do, as was mentioned in the beginning of this, is I teach Pork Quality Assurance Plus, and that's a training program that every farm has to have if they want to sell pigs. It's a certification program. It's how we prove what we do. I not very jokingly say that we produce 5 pounds of paperwork for every pound of pork. Everything has to be documented, and those documents have to be retained. Every medication that we give, every animal that's transported, the temperature of the buildings, all of that information is documented, and we have to keep all of those records. So teaching farmers how to do that and why it's important is one thing, but being able to use those records in the event of an outbreak, of any kind of FAD outbreak, is absolutely vital. So we teach farmers, we teach farm staff what to look for and how to be vigilant in monitoring our industry for foreign animal disease. So this gives you an idea of our pre-harvest traceability. Every farm has a PIN number. Every time we move animals, that PIN number goes with those animals so we can trace back where those animals came from. We're trying to have as much traceability as we possibly can. So planning and preparedness, we're working very hard to have a business continuity model so that we can, if we get a foreign animal disease and we have all of our producers registered, we know where they are, we know what they raise, that we can then be able to keep some people, if they're not infected, that we can keep some farms going. Right now, we don't have that ability, but we're working very hard to have that ability. There is an FMD vaccine bank. It is inadequate at best. We don't have enough doses. We don't know which variant of FMD is going to hit. We're trying very hard on the legislative side to get some money in the Farm Bill to have a vaccine bank that would at least help us areas of the country stay in business. So this is a picture of my farm. It's precious to me, it's precious to my family, and I thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. And I'm going to toss this back for any questions anyone might have.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we move to Q&A, please feel free to place yourself into the question queue by pressing pound 2 on your telephone keypad. You will hear a notification when your line is unmuted. At that time, please then state your name and question. To send a written question, select all panelists on the Send to drop-down menu of the chat panel located on the lower right-hand side of your screen.
We do have a written question that just came in. It's please speak a bit more about state restrictions on agricultural expansion.
Sure. So North Carolina is unique in that in 1992 we had pretty brisk expansion going on for a long time, but it's all in the eastern part of the state, so it was pretty concentrated. And then in 1995. There was a lagoon spill, and that precipitated a lot of regulations. At the time, I think I thought they were onerous, but now, retrospectively, they've been good for our industry. So one of the things that happened from that is there was a temporary moratorium on any new expansion, any new farms. You couldn't build any new farms for a little while. Well, when that temporary moratorium expired, the legislature enacted a permanent moratorium. So I cannot and this only affects swine, by the way. It doesn't affect poultry. It doesn't affect beef. It's just pigs. I cannot increase my steady state live weight on my farm. So I can never have any more sows on the land that I have available than I have right now. If I was able to use a different kind of manure handling system than I have right now, I might be able to get an exemption. There have not been very many exemptions, other than there are a couple very large farms that were built, and they were able to use some grant money to create some waste-to-energy programs, so creating a biogas, a methane production that can go onto the energy grid. And they got an exemption, so they were able to add animal units. I'm just not large enough, and I don't have enough land to do that. But there have been some farms that have been able to do that. Did that answer your question? I'm going to assume yes, because I'm not seeing anything that said that it didn't.
There's another written question that came in. With excellent biosecurity, how do you think you were infected with PEDV?
I know exactly how I was infected. I know when I was infected to the minute. So again, I do not have enough pigs to go to a nursery. PEDV is just extraordinarily virulent. It takes so little virus particles to infect a farm, more so than any other disease that I've ever seen, though. You know, I understand FMD is the most contagious disease, and that terrifies me because I know how quickly PEDV spread. But there was a truck that passed my farm with animals on it that were infected at the same time that I was moving pigs out of my farm. So the doors were open. It was a wet day, and you know, viruses love cold, wet weather, and the wind blew enough of those virus particles into where we were unloading pigs with the doors open that it infected. And it actually, we could trace how it ran through the farm, and that's exactly where the entry point was. So, yeah, and I'll tell you, I was on a team that we swabbed all over the place to look for porcine epidemic diarrhea virus particles. We found it at Walmart. We found them at the corner store. We found them at the gas station on the handles that you put in your car to get gas. They were everywhere.
We have another written question. It says, please discuss how waste generated from an animal disease outbreak are managed, composting, landfill, incineration.
Oh, what a good question. And it's a variety of those, and I'm not going to pretend that we know how to do that well. So when we talk about waste, there's a couple different kinds of waste. Generally, from our lagoons, we will either knife that or spray that into the soil. There's actually some research being done by the National Pork Board right now to see how long those viruses can remain active in the soil. because we have to spray it legally. We have to put that on a growing crop. So what do we do if we're infected? We were really fortunate when we were infected that we manage our lagoon really low. We keep it almost as low as you possibly legally can because we're in hurricane land. So if you get a hurricane, you have to make sure that your lagoon is as low as possible so you don't have any kind of spill. But a bigger issue is what do you do with those carcasses from those animals that died? So we did all of the above. We composted, and when we swabbed those and we couldn't keep up with that, we bought incinerators because we had to have a way. We couldn't render them. We couldn't send them to rendering, even though there were a lot of them, and that would have been the logical thing to do. We couldn't put those animals, even the carcasses, on the road. So we had to invest in incinerators, and we had to up our composting to be able to do that. Compost really couldn't keep up with the number of dead animals because it's also placenta and all those, all those wet things that it takes a long time to compost.
So we have another written question. It's, what is the greatest scientific need for the swine industry? Manure, disposal, vaccines for research and development that might be funded. We do, every year we do a vulnerability study to say what do we need to work on. I will tell you for the last 2 years, the highest priority was given to disease. We worry a lot about foot and mouth disease. We worry a lot about all FADs. Then we got hit with PED, and frankly, that was a dress rehearsal for foot and mouth disease. We often say Seneca Valley is a dress rehearsal, but for how you handle it, how you handle movement, we really learned a lot about how animal movement affects how we're spreading disease. So that's a great place that we would really like to see some real innovation and some good answers, and how to address some of these viruses that we don't have good information on. We have the Swine Health Information Center with Paul Sundberg, which is wonderful, and they have given us a huge leg up in identifying these diseases. But now we need concrete action in case not if, but when we get these diseases. Okay. Do we have any verbal questions coming in?
I do see one in the queue. I'll go ahead and unmute that line now. Caller, your line is unmuted.
This is Archer. This is Mark Scheer from Iowa Homeland Security. Wonderful presentation. My question goes to taking this issue forward after, say, for instance, you have moved pigs out of your operation, shipped them to Indiana, or your production neighbors might ship them to Iowa. Makes no difference. But what happens when you have a disease outbreak? Everything would theoretically stop for a time being. You say that
well, that is the question of the day. You hit the nail on the head. And that's why it's so important that we have a plan that addresses business continuity. Because today, let's say today, we get 2 cases of foot and mouth disease. And let's say we get it not in my county, but let's say we get it in the neighboring county. I still can't move pigs. And those sows are still going to farrow. So what do I do with those pigs? I don't know if you can still see the screen. I don't have anywhere to put those pigs to wait until we get a confirmation or to wait until something happens. So then it becomes an animal welfare issue. Do I euthanize all those pigs? Do I abort all of those sows that are pregnant? Because I don't have anything to do with those pigs. I don't have anywhere to put them. And that's the problem with the way that we have segregated our business all over the country is we are just-in-time producers, and we don't have flexibility in even in a matter of days. We just don't have anywhere to go. I move sows into the farrowing house 2 days before they're due to farrow. Then they farrow, and then I hold them for 3 weeks. I might be able to keep them for, I might be able to put a bunch of pigs into farrowing stalls and move the sows out, but I can't do that for very long. I can't do that for more than 5 days. So that's the terror, is how that will affect farms, how that will affect animal welfare. how that will affect movement. That's a great question, and I wish I had a great answer.
Beyond your operation, who retains the decision-making authority? Is it your production partner? Is it the transporter?
For what? It's going to be different for different questions.
That's what I was wondering. If they're moving, and for example, you were to say, okay, they're going to stop now, they can't return to the farm of origin, but they're going to go somewhere. Who makes that decision?
Oh, we would on the farm, and probably in conjunction with our production partner. Fortunately, they're a great partner, and they understand the pork industry very well. So we would probably come to the same decision. The crux of that is, okay, they're not moving. What do we do with them? Where do they go? I mean, I can't put them in my backyard. It's what do we do with those animals, and how do we handle it? Even on the road, in the event of an FAD, all of our county responders are going to have to get involved because it's going to limit where traffic can go, where feed trucks can go. I will make all of my neighbors really annoyed because there's going to be roads closed.
Thank you for engaging the great audience. Appreciate it.
We do have another question, written question, and it's, should we be using Seneca virus as a dress rehearsal for FMD?
I would argue that PED was a better dress rehearsal than Seneca Valley. Seneca Valley, I think that it's a dress rehearsal in that we need to be vigilant. We need to be looking for those animals with lesions. We need to keep an eye out, and that's a good way to train our staff and to train the staff on the farms to be really looking carefully at their animals and what they're going to be looking for. Because as we know, they're going to be looking for the same thing with FMD as they do for Seneca Valley. But Seneca Valley just doesn't pose the kind of risk or the kind of response that we would need if we actually got an FMD. That would be, a countrywide response that people just don't understand. I was actually in England when they got FMD, and I remember I saw the pyres where they were just burning animals all over the place. We're not going to do that, I hope. We don't even know. We're not sure how we would euthanize those animals. The chicken people are saying, oh, you can foam them. I don't know that we can foam finishing animals. I don't know. I wish I did.
I will say we also had a couple comments congratulating you on such a great presentation.
Well, thank you so much.
Do we have any other verbal questions coming in, Marvin?
So it doesn't look like we have any further questions here in the verbal queue.
So I have a question. I have a private question, and I'm not sure how I go about answering that. Can you walk me through that?
Yes. Did you want to just handle that after?
Well, actually, let me just answer it. So the question was, what are you hearing on the inside about current trade negotiations, soybean, pork products discussions with China, Mexico, Canada, for resolution before deadlines are reached? Absolutely hope for resolution before deadlines are reached. Absolutely. I am not on the policy side. From a pork board standpoint, I can't address too much of that. I can just say that as a farmer, I literally pray every day that we can resolve these trade negotiations. Just to give you a little aside, I was in Mexico City not a year ago, and there were people on the street who stopped and said, these are just random people that saw that I had an American flag on my shirt and stopped to say, we want to trade with you. And I said, and I want to trade with you. But there are people that are standing between us. As farmers, we want to be good neighbors and, of course, trade with your closest neighbors. It's stuff like being in a neighborhood. You want to be friends with your neighbors. So this has been very disheartening. That's just all I can say. It's been very disheartening, and I talk to different people who say, Joe Kearns did an economic update at World Pork Expo. He said, don't worry, this is short term, everything will be fine. Other people said things differently. I am clinging to Joe Kearns. I'm going to believe him because I have to.
Well, thanks very much, Jan. At this point, we're past our hour. I don't think we have any other questions coming in. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining the webinar today. I'd also like to let everyone know that we do have our next webinar is going to be on July 11th at 1 p.m. And the topic is going to be strengthening collaborations for state and federal One Health approaches to avian influenza. And the notices will be sent out within the next 2 weeks for that webinar. So with that, I thank everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining today's conference. The session has now concluded, and you may disconnect.